Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast, and we are doing something slightly different for our end of year review because let's face it, there are millions of political podcasts out there, all of them talking about what's happened in 2023. We're going to have a game of what happens in 2024, and there's a general rule that making predictions makes you look stupid in politics. Well, our four guests tonight in our panel are going to look very stupid because all we are doing is random predictions on what might happen in 2024. So none of them know all these ideas I've got in my head and written down. So we will see how they do. And we have our illustrious panel of fantastic Lib Dem Pod regulars. And first of all, we must congratulate Lisa Smart on being the top canvasser within the Lib Dem podcast panel team with over 7,000 attempts. So congratulations, Lisa. Welcome to the podcast again.
Hello, John.
In second place in that, I'm not going to go down the whole table, don't worry, but we did have Hannah Kitchen, who was very chuffed with her 5,500 contact attempts. Hello, Hannah.
Hello. I do think that from memory of a lot of those door knocking sessions, approximately 4,000 of those were not-ins.
Oh, that doesn't matter. That absolutely doesn't matter whatsoever. And then, of course, bringing up the male contingent in this podcast, we have Tom Morrison, also from Stockport and the parliamentary candidate for Cheadle. Hello, Tom.
Hey, John, and absolutely loving your Jurassic Park Christmas jumper.
Thank you very much.
Geek heaven. Love it.
And also has the benefit of being JP. Which
nice,
is very useful as well. And the leader of Horsham Council, our top Lib Dem podcast leader in our group is Martin Boffey. Hello, Martin.
Good to see you, John. Got to be top of something because my door knock stat was so low you didn't even put a number on it.
Well, there's no point in knocking a guy when he's down. When you do less than Richard Kemp, you've got to think, right, okay, much improvement to be had. Okay. So we're going to get into our first of our scenarios. So, well, actually, the first thing I want to do from you guys is, and I'll start with you, Tom, is I want your prediction of when the election will be and what you think the result will be based on as things are now.
So I think it's going to be in spring.
Ooh.
And now I think we're looking at potentially in May, but I will slip in that I think there is potential for an April election. I think so. I think you've got to be prepared for April. And what the result will be, I think there will be a Labour victory, but with a very fine margin.
Hannah, do you want to put a number on that? Go on, Tom, just pick a number. What? So Labour get a majority. What are you guessing at?
I think their majority will be, what I will say is I think their majority will be less than 30.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of where I think I put down 25 for mine. Hannah?
Right then, following on from Thomas on the fence, Morrison, hedging his bets all over the place there. I think we will have a November general election. I think it will be at the very end of November, whatever the last week in November is. I think that Labour will win a majority. I'm not very good at numbers. Of 17.
17, so really narrow thing. So the left wingers in Labour could cause all sorts of troubles. Okay.
November, it'll be raining, turnout will be poor.
Yeah, and actually, it was interesting hearing from one of the other political podcasts. It will be the most lukewarm general election going, that no one really cares about Sunak and no one really cares about Starmer. So it'll be a very interesting one. Martin.
Okay, so I was going to go autumn, but we obviously have to be more specific than that. So for no good reason at all, I'll say, how about the middle of October? Which probably doesn't work for all sorts of reasons that I'm not familiar with, but let's go with mid-October because frankly I think he's going to be waiting for some good news that's never going to come. Labour majority, I don't know, 45.
Ooh, okay, fairly healthy. And Lisa, round us off.
So I think the autumn, and I think more specifically end October, early November, because I think he wants to come back from. So he wants to do 2 years. He wants to come back from recess and have the podium on the steps of Downing Street and go, right, look, we've done this, this and this, insert made up achievements here. And that's why it's end October, early November. I don't think they care that much about conferences. So conference is a consideration, but it's not enough so that they won't just drive a coach and horses through it. I think the one thing I agree with Tom on is that we do need to be ready for spring, but that's not the same as expecting it in spring, because there are two peaks as to when it's most likely: April, May, and then I think October, November. We need to be ready to go in the spring, but also be able to afford to continue financially until the autumn. I think the result, so don't forget where we're coming from. A Labour majority of one needs a swing bigger than Tony Blair got in 1997. So we're just looking at where the polls are and having knocked on some doors, detecting the level of support for the current Conservative offering. It is, I think, for a lot of people, an awful lot of people, a stop the Tories election.
Yeah.
And on that basis, it will be, I think, a slim Labour majority of under 20. But I think the Liberal Democrats will have more people elected than we had in 2019.
Very nice.
Or indeed 2017 or 2015.
Right. So, and we're going to come to our first of our new scenarios now, and I'm going to change it up so it's not the same person doing the first answer, because that's always harsh. So we're going to go to Hannah for this first scenario. Okay, this is going to be the first one. After a terrible set of local election results for the Conservatives, Rishi Sunak stands down, and in a surprise move, Nigel Farage becomes the leader of the Conservative Party. What happens to the Conservatives, and how do the Lib Dems cope with that?
You're going to ask me how that would impact on a general election.
Yeah.
So I think that if Rishi Sunak was to step down, Nigel Farage was to become leader of the Conservatives, I think we would see a massive, massive poll bounce for the Conservatives, because while people don't have strong opinions really on Sunak or on Starmer, people do have strong opinions on Farage. And I think he will inject a real pile of fascist excitement into the right of the Conservative Party. I think we will see a massive surge in Conservative support in the Red Wall, which will see all of those poor little Red Wall Labour candidates who've been measuring up their curtains for their new parliamentary office descend into a spiral of panic. In terms of the Liberal Democrats, I actually think that will be fine, because our sort of, as a general rule, our target constituencies are not within the Boris Farage loving Red Wall, and the very, very, very sensible proper Tories in all of the Liberal Democrat target seats in the West Country and the South East and London, wherever it is we have target seats, will be frankly appalled. And the Labour squeeze will become like the easiest thing on earth, because all the Labour types will be like, oh my God, we really do have to beat the Conservatives. And the best way to do that in these seats is to vote Lib Dem. And I think Farage will go crashing straight into a pretty soon general election, probably like August or something totally batshit, when no one ever has a general election, because he'll be so excited about his polling figures. And it will all be chaos.
Anyone else want to come in on that? Should we go, Martin? Do you disagree?
Not particularly. I think turnout would be massive. I think it would get the punters to the polling station one way or the other. I think it might make it a bit easier for us to raise money. And I don't know exactly what would happen in other seats, but I think Hannah's bang on. It'd be really good in our target seats, and I think it could be. I think it could be one of those results that could be things that could be, strangely enough, could be really good for us, but not necessarily that great for the country. and I wouldn't like to guess what the outcome of it would be. But yeah.
Lisa, any thoughts on this?
I agree with Martin that a number of people who had been previous Conservative donors would not like to donate to the Fash or to Nigel Farage-led Conservative Party. And I agree with the analysis on the, I guess, red wall, blue wall differences, and also Hannah's comments on the squeeze. So the Labour squeeze, the Green squeeze, we do need to stop the Conservatives, and to do that round here, in our target seats voting Lib Dem is the way to do it. I think Martin's bang on that it would not be good for the country at all. I also think the Conservative Party would see some splits, because there are some people who are, who are Conservatives and who agree with us on lots of things, but their driving thing is that the state should be quite small, taxes should be quite low, but actually we shouldn't just go around beating up people who can't fight back. And Farage wouldn't fit the bill for them. So we'd see some defections, I think, probably some reasonably high profile ones. So like we had in the Brexit dramas, there were people crossing the floor, literally crossing the floor of the chamber. I think we'd see a little bit of that as well. So a number of lobby journalists would be as high as kites on the excitement and the adrenaline of it for a period of time. When they were actually asked to deliver something, when a Farage-led Conservative Party was asked to actually deliver something, and they worked out that administration is actually quite tough, and it's not just about speech making and scapegoating, I think the shine would come off.
Interesting. Tom, finish us off on this one.
Yeah, completely agree with that last point Lisa said. I think if Farage became the leader of the Conservatives, it could sign that party to history. I think he's an opposition. I wouldn't even call him a politician. He's an opportunist. He's oppositional. Farage. I think it would be disastrous for the country, because I think we would have a truly inept and chaotic person behind the steering wheel, and it would send this country straight into a general election, because the Tories would split, and that would be that.
Right. Okay. Very interesting.
Hazard a guess that demagogue is the word you're looking for.
Yeah. Okay. Next scenario, and we're going to go to Lisa to this one. Following being kicked out of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn decides not to stand in his current constituency and ends up as the leader of the Green Party. What happens in that scenario?
So I think righteous indignation is where Jeremy Corbyn thrives. It's his absolute comfort zone. And so standing, because he's been stopped from standing as a Labour candidate, and standing to spite Starmer is absolutely what he's going to do. There's also the payout whereby if you're a sitting MP, you stand and lose, you get, I want to say £30,000, but there's an amount of money you get for doing that, which is not insignificant. So I think he is going to stand. I think the Greens have even more internal bureaucracy, it seems, than we have as Liberal Democrats. And so somebody coming in and winning their internal election with the record he has, I think while as a spectator sport, it would be highly entertaining for us as Liberal Democrats, I don't think it would be good either for Corbyn or the Green Party.
Hannah.
Sorry, I was so excited there, I couldn't press my button. So I think that in that scenario, absolutely nothing would happen. The Greens would continue to make colossal amounts of hot air and noise. There'd be a massive, great big kerfuffle about how Jeremy Corbyn was going to stand and win in, I don't know, Sheffield Central, Bristol, insert random seat that the Greens have come last in since the start of time, but they're definitely going to win in this upcoming general election because they've got 3.5 councillors in that patch. We would get absolute endless earache from Greens in a wide variety of our target constituencies about how the Greens are going to win a majority in the general election now with Corbyn as their leader, and they would fail to hold Brighton Pavilion without Caroline Lucas, and they would come out with a grand total of 0 MPs at the next general election?
Tom.
I think there would be, so two things would happen immediately. There would be a diktat from Lib Dem headquarters on our environmental message, because we actually have a fantastic environmental record, both at a local council level and through the work that we've done nationally. And I think that would be a target to that kind of more Middle England Green supporting / Green member. And I think you'll see an influx of Green members joining the Liberal Democrats, because whilst the Greens are to the left of many parties, there's actually a core moderate group of Greens, and I know several of them in Cheadle, and they would be appalled if Jeremy Corbyn became their leader. I think Caroline Lucas would make her displeasure at this very clear, and that would cause more problems for the Green Party. And then Jeremy Corbyn and the Green Party would kind of wither away, and all the work that they've done, the progress, because let's be fair, they have made progress in many seats across the country, that would be undone completely. So that would be my prediction.
I suppose before I bring Martin in, do we all think Corbyn is going to stand against Labour at the next general election as an independent? I think that's general nodding. Martin, and you're to finish this off.
Just on that, sorry, John, I wouldn't rule him out. I don't know if the deadline's passed, but I wouldn't rule him out going for Mayor of London.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Martin.
Well, I suppose my innate sort of kind of cynicism is going to make a slight appearance here, in that I suppose I'm just thinking about it for a moment from the public perspective and not those who are really interested in politics, and just sort of say, would anybody notice? Really?
That's fair enough. That's absolutely true. I mean,
on Martin.
He is literally yesterday's man. So yeah, that is very interesting. Okay, next scenario, and we're going to go to Tom first. This is a non-political one, but how it might affect politics. England football team win the Euros in 2024, leading to a national sense of happiness and pride. What happens after that?
Okay. Do we know who they beat in the final?
Oh, honestly, mate.
All right, okay. So England win the Euros.
Were you going to say something like we beat Germany in the final or something like that?
England win the final of the Euros, and Marcus Rashford makes a speech on the pitch about how this is giving everyone hope, and isn't it a shame that our government does not, support free school meals in schools, does not help underprivileged communities. And I wouldn't put it past it. He gets the winning goal as well. And that's what happens. And actually, it turns people against the government. Sunak invites him to 10 Downing Street. Rashford says, I'm not going. Trent Alexander-Arnold says, I'm not going. And it can silence the Tories to the dustbin of history.
Right, so he thinks it would actually be a negative. So does anyone at all disagree with that, or think that a really positive good news story where the nation is very happy might actually help the Tories? Hannah?
I don't think that, but I just want some clarification, John. Are we talking about the England football men's team here?
Yes, because the women's isn't
Right.
next.
Sorry. Just wanted some clarification on
No,
that.
because the women doing spectacularly well is fairly regular these points. It's where the what if is what if the men actually do something.
Yeah, it's old news that the women's team are really good.
Yeah,
boring. They win everything.
The other thing I think would happen is that somebody, because lots of politicians try and be the man or woman of the people, don't they? And go, oh yes, I'm massively into football, and then they can't name two players, and somebody ends up on an embarrassing, whether it's Nick Ferrari or with somebody, just a complete car crash of an interview where they try and look like they've got some sort of cultural references.
Yeah, I think everyone
definitely happens.
I do think there'll be a Sorry, mate. I was going to say, I do think there will be a bit of like a Lee Anderson or a Bridgen or some kind of like right-wing madman will say that he's not watching the England football team because they're too woke, and therefore won't be able to watch the final and celebrate it, and will look, even more stupid than they actually are.
Because this was Priti Patel previously, wasn't it? It was all about taking the knee. I remember last time. Was that? Was it? Was it? I might have.
Priti Patel. I think Lee Anderson was probably one of them as well. Actually,
yeah. So no,
I
that's.
think it would precipitate a September general election. I think the Conservatives would think, yeah, finally, this is the good news that we can use, and then it just spectacularly backfires on them in completely unforeseen ways, and it actually becomes something for the opposition in the street to rally around. Like, now we can get rid of this lot as well, and everything will be better in the future. So yeah.
And I suppose when we go to these other scenarios that we're going to talk about, well, is actually the power of distraction in terms of our politics, as in just people not thinking about how terrible politics is for a while. Is that a net benefit for the Tories? In fact, they're not thinking about how rubbish they are. Hannah?
I think Lisa's right. I think, like, if you imagine Rishi Sunak trying to be like pleased about the football, like, he's just going to come over so completely clueless and non-genuine that I think they'll find themselves in a very difficult situation if they have to kind of like try and participate in the public outpouring of joy and delight about this.
And also, we just want another Ed Davey photo of him in the pub going like that again. That, you know. But to be fair, it was so naff, and I really liked it, and the fact that they mocked it up again. But go on, Martin.
I was just going to say, it's sad that I actually know something about this, but if it turns out that Declan Rice is an absolute stormer for in the tournament for England, seeing as he plays for Arsenal, and Keir Starmer's an Arsenal fan, could actually be really bad for the Tories.
Yeah. See, there you go. Right. Next issue. Now, this is one which obviously we've had a bit of news today on, but as this is going out between Christmas and New Year, what effect of Trump getting elected will have on a British election if it happens after it? Martin.
I think we've got bigger problems than the British election if Trump wins again, frankly. But how would it affect us?
Would it see a kind of? I suppose the argument is,
I think it would probably be different from last time, in that I think it would create more of a reaction against that style of politics than an endorsement of it. I suspect, because I think people have had enough of it, and I think that we don't want that here, please.
Lisa, what do you think?
I think Martin's right, and I think it would impact. He'd just be more mentioned in the discourse. So if our election was after theirs, it'd be, well, look at what's happened. You know, Trump by fake news and just making stuff up and subverting the rules and so on has won, and we can't let that happen here. I think that there would be some lessons to be learned from the campaigns that were run, because you can learn from other people's wins, but often you learn more from other people's and indeed your own losses. And I think lessons for campaigners around the use of online campaigning. I think so, bearing in mind we are in a new or increasingly new era of AI and things that could be faked but targeted very, very specifically in a way that we haven't seen before. So I think we can learn some there. I always remember that the Biden victory, the campaign manager just didn't think about Twitter. They hardly used, and they just didn't use certain media as a way of campaigning. And I think there's stuff for all of us to learn. So I think we'd learn from the campaigns and by some of the messages, and that's how it would play in.
Tom or Hannah, anything you want to add to this?
I think it would be really interesting that how Sunak would manage that. So let's imagine Sunak's still Prime Minister, and so it could go one or two ways, couldn't it? So if you think about when Trump won last time, was it Theresa May was the first to go over? And maybe I'm looking at this through rose-tinted glasses, but I'm pretty sure it played really badly for her, because there was like the hand-holding, and I think the majority of the country are like almost like, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. And Theresa May looked quite weak in that. Or, so will Sunak try and cozy up, which I think will be very bad for him, or will he see an opportunity to act more like how Macron acted, where you become that kind of, you try and almost alpha male him, and you look stronger within your own country because you are challenging Trump a bit more. I think Sunak, from his past record, I think he would try the former and almost try and say, well, I could be the person that kind of calms Trump down, and it will play really badly for him. But I think there would be an opportunity to make himself look more sensible and more on top of things, and using Trump as that kind of a almost point to Trump and say, things could be really bad. So,
Hannah, do you think it would affect, like Martin suggested, that there might be a slight reaction to it in terms of, oh God, we don't want that here? Or do you think that it doesn't really affect it at all, maybe?
So I think if there was Trump victory before our general election, I think what it would do is empower what we're already seeing within the media and the sort of ever more vocal right wing of the Conservative Party, who are, we're already seeing this. They're quite determined to try and drag Labour and us into fighting the general election on some sort of culture war. So all the kind of quite marginal wedge issues. The government were at it again yesterday, telling schools that they must tell parents if a child comes out to them as transgender, which is of course just absolute nonsense, as well as potentially very harmful. And I think that we would see a significant sort of uptick, hard to imagine even more of an uptick, to be honest, in that culture war battle. And I think it will make it, because Labour have been sort of trying to dodge it, haven't they, so far, by just not saying anything on it. And I think that if that kind of stuff is coming over sort of loud and clear, because it's not so much if he wins, it's more the campaign, the stuff that we said during the campaign, and then the stuff that he'll do in those first few days in office. He did it last time, abolish abortion rights, and abolish what visible rights there are in various states in America, and that would all then be, of course, reported in the UK press, which would give oxygen to those sorts of people over here, and I think that would be very, very unpleasant indeed.
And I think there's a general rule, like what starts in America ends up over here. I think one of the big things that started with Trump is that lack of accountability, or the lack of need to even be accountable, in terms of, Lisa talked about the actual how you campaign. But the fact is that and Boris Johnson took it a little bit, never say sorry, never be accountable for anything. And the idea, and we've seen it, as we're recording, Peter Bone obviously is facing a recall petition from Parliament. In years gone by, maybe this is me thinking a little bit, is having a slightly nicer view in hindsight. I think most of these MPs would have resigned previously, rather than waited for a recall position to kick them out. And is that a fact that with Trump and that kind of very polar politics, that you get a kind of anything's acceptable until just hang on to power as hard as you can, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about it just in terms of when these things happen, and it's kind of the slightly volatile nature of it is that if it's going to be an influence on our general election at all, it's going to be because it happens actually during the short campaign, because presidential elections are in November. So if we haven't had one by the time it takes place, unless we think the January election is likely, which I don't really, it's going to actually happen during the short campaign, which could be pretty interesting.
Right, Martin, I think who hasn't gone first? I think Lisa hasn't gone first yet. I'm not sure. Right, so you have gone first. Okay, right. I'm going to throw this to. I'm going to throw it to Martin because he's just spoken.
Okay.
A major piece of infrastructure in Britain fails, causing widespread, let's say, power outages and energy restrictions next year, causing significant troubles to many households and businesses. How does that affect the general election? Does it push it back? Does it all but end even the slightest hopes of Tories? Could the Tories collapse even further? I mean, we've already got rotting schools, but this is just one step further.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends what it is, but I suspect it will push it back, whatever it is, assuming that it happens at a time when there's time for it to be pushed back. But I don't think anyone ends up coming out of it covered in glory from any persuasion, because I think, I don't think it's something that much hay can be made out of without people just sort of reacting, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah. I suppose
there's more important things.
The line I'm going for, I didn't want to go. So one of the options was a second influx of the pandemic. Something that becomes almost like a national emergency.
Yeah.
How does that play in, Lisa?
Competence is already going to be one of the either secondary or tertiary themes of this election, because it's one thing to be able to make really inspiring speeches. It's another thing to actually govern. And so many people at the moment say on the doorstep how things just aren't working. Lots of things are broken. And so I think people expect there to be a level of emergency preparedness and disaster recovery plans in place. And so I think it would play even worse for the Tories and would feed into the already existing narrative that just not very good at this.
Yeah, I agree. Tom?
Yeah, I think it would. I think it would play really badly. I think I wouldn't surprise me if they were to use something like that to kind of push through emergency legislation to extend a parliament. And I think that could be something that they would do. But in talking of, like, you said like schools that are falling down. This morning I was just walking around the school in Cheadle with the head teacher and some of the counsellors to look at the kind of the RAC issues there, and it wouldn't surprise me actually if there was some kind of dreadful infrastructure crisis that you've just described there, John, because I think it's it wouldn't surprise me if that were on the cards at some point, because it's this. I think we're all paying the cost of 13 consecutive years of Conservative chancellors, and we are definitely now seeing the impacts of that.
Anna?
So I'm going to go for the opposite view. To be awkward. So I think you've been quite vague about what this thing is, but let's assume that the government somehow manages to blame this problem on global factors.
I'm sure you're going to say small boats. I was sure you were going to say small boats.
No, I'm going to go bigger than that. They're going to blame it on the war in the Middle East or the war in Ukraine or, Russia, whatever, something. So I think we will then end up with a scenario like we did with Johnson, who was clearly completely and utterly incompetent. But, the thing that sort of kept coming back to sort of during the sort of pandemic type campaigning was, well, who would do a better job? Would Corbyn have done a better job? It's really difficult. No Prime Minister has never had to deal with anything like this before, and it is all out of his control, really. And so I think that's what we would end up with. I think the government would somehow manage to pull form of blame shifting, clean hands type competence out of this. So it's all a complete and utter disaster, but out of our hands, nothing we can do. The only thing we can do now is offer stable government. I like Tom's idea of extending the parliament, which would be very unpopular in the short term, but then at the same time, God, who wants a general election when, like, you can't even turn your lights on or boil a pan of water? And then they'd somehow get us through it all. And we'd have a vaccine bounce style. When was it? 2021 general election. In 2025, it would be like a power back on bounce general election, and somehow Sunak would scrape a fucking win.
Can we? All right, okay. One thing I want to put out there: I have had, for those that don't know, I have had county elections in 2017 and 2021, both of which were awful, awful years. Can we not even suggest having another awful, terrible bump in 2025? Or my heart just won't take it. Right, we're gonna now into a couple of quick ones because we've only got about 15 minutes left on this. So I realise these are complicated. So Tom, we're going to you to start off for this. An Irish border poll happens, suggesting a majority of people in Northern Ireland now want to be part of the Republic.
Oh God, it would. That is a constitutional crisis of the like we have never seen in this country before, and it would absolutely. I think it would work. The Tories would be the beneficiaries of that completely. The Labour Party would be absolutely split down the middle, and I think it would be Where would the Lib Dems be? I mean, generally with the Lib Dems, if you've got two Lib Dems, you'll find about 8 different opinions. So I think we would we'd call probably a special conference and go through the standing orders to debate all this. So we'll have our opinion in about 4 years' time on that.
Well, as the queen of special conferences, Hannah, what do you think? Because obviously it's not out the realms of possibility. I think obviously Scottish nationalism is a little bit on the wane given the self-destruction of the SNP. But actually, these issues in Northern Ireland are not going away.
Yeah, I do wonder if this is something that some government will have to tackle at some point down the line. I mean, I think if the Irish and the Northern Irish have any sense, they will wait until we have a different government in situ before they open that particular can of worms. I think. I think Starmer would sit on the fence. He'd just be absolutely wedged on that fence whatsoever.
No.
We would hold a special conference led by our sister party, the Alliance Party in Northern Ireland, and we would ask for their wise hope and guidance on how to navigate this thorny matter.
So the first thing we'd see is the number of English journalists and commentators who have no conceptual understanding of the history of that part of the world. And we'd also see, I think, primarily, we'd see a real difference in opinions regionally based on links with Ireland and Northern Ireland, I think. I think we'd also see that lots of people, it's not a really big deal for lots of people who live in Great Britain. And I think that is a big shame. But I think it would be a bigger deal for government than it would be for the public of Great Britain.
Martin.
So is this an opinion poll or is this an actual border poll called by the Secretary of State under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement?
Correct. Border poll.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's a treaty we signed. It was ratified by both parts of the island of Ireland. So if that's what the result is, it's happening. It's then a case of what the reaction is to it. But you can't reject a democratic process that has happened under the terms of a treaty. So
no, because it is strange because during the Brexit debate that was going on when what deal we were going to get in Theresa May, there was a polling of what the Tories would find acceptable, what Conservatives would find acceptable, and I was all like, they wouldn't care if Scotland went independent as long as Brexit happened, and one of them very highly was they would not care about Northern Ireland. And so that is obviously something that obviously depending on how right wing the Tory party then goes, we will see. Right, next one that all of us should be interested. I'm going to go to Lisa first. In 2024, local governments all over Britain start going bust in vast numbers, contemplating. Yeah, well, yeah, we know there's been obviously issues already with many councils, but to the point where local government funding becomes not viable. What happens?
I think we're there, John. I really think we're there. It's So the most recent one, I think, was it Nottingham, issued a Section 114 notice, which is the official notice whereby they can only spend money on statutory services. So any of the things that are non-statutory can't be done. And this has been a big deal in the trade press, in the local government press for a while, and it's now actually getting some proper coverage in the more mainstream press. It's a really, really big deal that local government can't afford to do the things it needs to do. So there are several reasons for it. Demand's gone up and the amount of money that's come in has gone down, and they're the two main reasons. So I think that rightly, lots of people don't spend ages thinking about, well, who does pick up my bin and who does deliver social care and who is responsible for this weird element of, I don't know, environmental health enforcement or whatever it is. But it's a really very big, it's an enormous deal for our communities, and particularly the most vulnerable in our communities, because they're the people who use most of the services, who need to draw on. If you're presenting as homeless, you need to have those services there. The council has a responsibility to you if you're homeless. But if you're being housed in hotels several boroughs away, as is the case in some places, that's a really big deal to you. So it's a huge big deal. I think it feeds in further to the narrative of things just aren't working. And I would be amazed if there were a Labour government and there was a massive amount of money coming into local government. There isn't just going to be Rachel Reeves gets in or whoever, and the taps go on for local government. There just isn't going to be that. What I think there might be some changes in what local government's empowered to do when it comes to raising revenue or when it comes to devolution. I think there might be a shift there if there's a Labour government or a Labour-led government. But I don't think there's suddenly going to be billions and billions of pounds for councils to deliver really important services.
Martin, this is obviously very close to home as a council leader.
Yep.
What do you think?
I think you would have a big Labour win in a general election, and then they walk into Whitehall and have a shit fit because this is absolutely not what they wanted to be spending any of their time or non-existent money on. And yeah, because none of them want to do anything about it. It's been going on for decades and getting worse and worse all the time. And it's just, they don't think there's any votes in it. They don't think it's what people care about. And none of them really want to do anything about it. When they're actually forced to do something about it, I fear it'll be piecemeal power grabs all over the place. Let's crash some local authorities into each other to try and save some money. It doesn't work. They end up becoming poorer performing. But we end up with bigger, less democratically run local authorities with all the real power getting sucked into the centre, because that's what Labour does.
Interesting. Tom?
Oh, my button didn't work there. So on a kind of human social level, this would be an absolute disaster. It would be an absolute disaster. And we are talking this. People would, we're talking, no, awful, just really terrible. I think the Tories will do everything they can to blame kind of the waste in councils and stuff. And interestingly, I had a conversation with one of our councillors, Julian, about this, literally as I was about to come on to the podcast. And we were discussing about how that whole kind of council waste line that Gove is trying to push and Sunak's trying to push just doesn't land anymore. Like, our residents know that there are, councils' budgets are getting tighter and tighter and tighter and non-existent, and they know whose fault that is from the door knocking I've done. So I think it would be another nail in the coffin of the Conservative Party. I really do. I think it would be, but more important than that, it would be horrendous for the amount of the support, social care. You mentioned bins, but just environmental waste, environmental hazards, it would be disastrous. and completely agree with Martin. This isn't, whilst the Tories have sped this process up, this process of managed decline of our local government base started with the Labour Party. And that's what it is. This is managed decline of local government. So those parties should be absolutely ashamed of themselves.
And I suppose, Hannah, a lot of people don't realise what a council does until the council stops doing it. But yeah, your final word on this.
Yeah, indeed. And also, this does already sound like the status quo, to be perfectly honest. And I think that I think that the Labour Party are going to come into power whenever that is. And I think it's not just that they're not going to do anything about this. I think we're going to end up with however many, 4, 8, 10 years of Labour Party austerity, and the Labour Party bleating on endlessly about how there is no money for local government. And even though they will be in government, that will not be their fault. That will still be our fault and the Tories' fault. And I think the reason that I don't think that the Labour government has any interest whatsoever in investing in local government is because Labour win their local councils by default. So that, you know, they just win them by default. All those London boroughs that just fall Labour time after time after time. Barnsley has been Labour since the start of time. It was Labour all through the Labour administrations. It was Labour all through the Tory administrations. However much money any government gives to those councils and however much money they have to spend on their services makes absolutely no difference whatsoever as to whether Labour politicians get to run those councils. I know there's plenty that swing, you know, I can see my Stockport colleagues sat there going, they don't get to win our council by default. But the vast majority of Labour run councils, they win by default. And they would, I think, really like to see the Liberal Democrats do worse and worse and worse in local government, because if the councils that we run, we can't run because they don't give us any money, that will give them a wedge in areas where we do well because we've got a local government base. So that was a really positive, festive note for me to end on, wasn't it?
But I will just say, before Martin comes in, one of the ways, because you do get it where there's councils that have been Conservative run for a very long time, councils have been Labour run for a very long time. The only people that challenge in all those types of seats are the Lib Dems. And as a campaigning podcast, we've seen start-up groups go on, win 1 seat, win 2 seats, and become effective and proper opposition, and sometimes running the council, because actually people like us and the people like you listeners out there get off your backside, do that door knocking and win. And the importance of winning and holding these buggers to account is really important. Martin?
Yeah. Just that it's scary, but the standing DLUC, the Department of Levelling Up advice at the moment for dealing with financial issues is, use your reserves, make better use of your reserves. They're basically just saying the only way you can we're going to deal with this is through reserves, whether you've got them or not. So whilst on the one hand they're sort of complaining about councils falling over, not being in control of their finances or not making bad decisions, the only thing they've got is, well, you know, use all the money that you've got put by for a rainy day, and when you haven't got any of that, well, don't know, basically.
Keir Starmer gets elected. We all think that he's going to get some sort of majority. It may be only a small majority. And in order to shore up, he announces that voting will change to a PR system. Lisa, what does that mean?
It means all of the massive voting reform nerds spend about 3 years arguing over which is the correct form of PR. I mean, I really hope it happens, because I think it would transform politics and transform the country and make things an awful lot better. And it would be one of the things I would want to really fight for if elected. But I think it's unlikely that if they win a majority under first past the post, they then scrap first past the post.
But it all depends on the strength of that majority, I suppose, Tom.
Yeah, so I think it is. It's all about the strength of the majority. I could see Labour winning. If they won a healthy majority, the majority would get whittled down, and in their last term in Parliament, then they might go, we're going to change the voting system to make sure the Tories never get back in. I could definitely see that happening. But if it were to happen and Keir Starmer were to announce it, I think we will see not only radical political change in this country. I think we would see social, economic. I think it would be nothing but brilliant for this country for a proportional system to be put in, and it would make for a fairer country as well.
And I suppose, though, the key question on all this is not just what happens in 2024, because Labour are not going to get some golden inheritance like happened in 97, is what happens the election after that. And if Labour thinks, crikey, we might have a maximum of 5 years before we go into an absolutely hellish one where the Tories might sweep back into power with Suella Braverman as Prime Minister, Hannah, could that be enough of an incentive to actually think, right, we do need to change this system?
I mean, this would be far and away the most sensible thing that the Labour Party and Keir Starmer could possibly do in order to prevent the Tories ever getting back into power. And in fact, it's not just that it would stop the Tories getting back into power. This would be the end of the Conservative Party. Because if you look at how factional it is at the minute, if we moved, there would be no need. The only reason the Conservatives and the Labour Party exist is because they benefit under the two-party system. So once that was gone, the Conservative Party literally wouldn't exist anymore. And so for that reason, there is absolutely not a chance in hell that Keir Starmer would do this, because his ego will get the better of him, and also he would be worried about the mirroring collapse of the Labour Party. But yeah, it would be great. I do think, however, I think there would be a lag in terms of how many seats we as Liberal Democrats win, because it's going to take people a really long time to get their heads around the notion of you can actually vote for the party you want to vote for. Like the tactical voting thing has been so firmly driven into people, and it's this one or that one has been so firmly driven into people. I think there's going to be a real lag where we try to explain to people that you can just vote for the party you want. That is absolutely fine.
The end of bar charts, Martin. Is that what we're talking about here?
No, I think we're actually talking about Keir Starmer being the first Labour Prime Minister since the Second World War to be deposed by his own party. Sorry, but I think that's probably what would happen. But actually, I think the experience in New Zealand is quite instructive on this in terms of what happened, because I heard an interview with Helen Clark a few months ago that was really interesting. And I take Hannah's point about the end of the Conservative Party, but what actually tends to happen in these situations is that the big main parties cease to have to be coalitions themselves anymore, because that's how coalitions get formed in this country, and they lose their lunatic fringes and cohere around a little bit more of what they actually are as a party, because you immediately get these splinter party parties form off to the other side. This does actually move into an interesting scenario. I was thinking the other day when someone sent me the latest projected result based on a certain poll or something, which had like Labour with 450 MPs or something like that. And I went, well, actually, that would be quite interesting, because the thing that would then happen is that the Labour Party would immediately split into two, and the main part of it would still be big enough to have an opposition, so to be the majority, and the other bit would become the largest party in Parliament, the second party in Parliament, so they'd be both the government and the opposition at the same time.
I think we see from councils that have massive majority, one-party majorities, the internal fighting just ratchets up so much more. But no, that is a nice thought to end on, actually getting a voter system and Labour and Tories maybe splitting. So thank you very much, guys. I do realise we're coming to the end of the podcast in our kind of what-if scenarios on 24. Well, there was loads we didn't get to. What if the Falkland Island gets invaded? What happens with Taiwan? There's loads of different scenarios, but we might have to come back to that. But I really appreciate all your time, and we want to say a huge thank you to all our listeners over this last year. This is, believe it or not, was episode 226 of our little podcast. So we really do appreciate it. We hope you had a wonderful Christmas and a wonderful New Year. We'll be back in the new year with lots of, because whatever happens, 2024 is going to be seminal. We are going to have a big set of local elections in 2024 in places around England. We are going to have a general election. We've got police and crime elections. We've got counties only a year and a bit away after that. So it is going to be a year that changes British politics, and we can't be the people that sit on the sidelines and wait to change to happen. We have to be the people that go out and help make some of that change. So you are all lovely, lovely people. Thank you to Lisa, to Martin, to Hannah and to Tom. Have a fantastic new year, and we will see you in 2024. Bye for now.